Sat Sri Akal, everyone. I'm Sonia Dhami, joining you from Cupertino, California. And it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our third virtual tour of Sikh treasures around the world. We are excited to take this trip with you today and see some spectacular artworks, learn of some legendary personalities, and experience Sikh history within the context of the physical spaces of institutions, both Sikh and British. Some are modern, while others are old. We hope to be spending about an hour with you today, which includes the presentation, followed by any questions that you might have. Please feel free to write your comments or questions in the chat box that appears on your screen. And you don't have to wait till the end of the presentation to write your questions. You can add them as they come, and we will be keeping an eye out for those, and we will take those up after the presentation. My co-host today is Ranveer Singh, as before. He is joining us from London. He is the passionate founder of the community initiative, A Little History of the Sikhs, which brings alive for us Sikh history in the streets of London. Ranveer?
Vaheguru, Sat Sri Akal ji. Hello, everyone. So I'm Rav Ranveer Singh, and I'm from A Little History of the Sikhs, and we do walking tours in London, day trips in England, and study visits to Europe. So London vich tuada swagat hai, bienvenue à Londres, and bienvenuto a Londres. London vich tuada khush madid. Okay, so Benji, as you said, we're going to look at some of the places we are going to visit today. Just for those who are not from London, for our international audience, we will just quickly tell you about the City of London, which is right in the centre. It is surrounded by these 32 boroughs, and these boroughs make up the Greater London area. In the west of London, we have Hounslow and Heathrow Airport. And as most Punjabi communities in the past landed at Heathrow, they found themselves learning about a place in Ealing called Southall, or Southall, as they say in Punjabi. And that's the famous part of Little Punjab of London. I am not from the west. I am from the east, born in Newham, but now live in Redbridge. And we have our own little part of Punjab we call Little Lahore down in Ilford. So we have West Punjab in the east and East Punjab in the west in London. So Little History of the Sikhs is all about keeping the past alive, because if the past is remembered, it brings knowledge, and knowledge has life and power as long as it is saved from human forgetfulness. So Benji, you asked me to just provide you with an overview of today's tour, and this is probably our most comprehensive tour to date. We're going to start in the centre. We're going to start in Westminster with the Wallace Collection. Then we'll move to, I think we're going to go soon from there to Trafalgar Square, possibly. We go to Ealing. We go to the Singh Sabha Gurdwara in Ealing. We will visit the Khalsa Jatha in Kensington and Chelsea. We'll go back to Westminster with the National Liberal Club. We will go to Caxton Hall in Westminster. And I think today's tour, we're going to end at the British Museum. So that's our highlights for the tour. So we start in Westminster, we'll work our way around these boroughs, and we'll end up in Camden, actually, in the British Museum in Camden. So for people who have joined the series, we have a little drone footage of London for you with some commentary. So we'll listen to that for a minute, and then we'll get started.
Have you seen the old man in the closed down market, kicking up the paper with his worn out shoes? In his eyes you see no pride, and held loosely at his side, yesterday's paper telling yesterday's news. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London, show you something to make you change your mind. Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London, show you something to make you change your mind.
So let me take you by my side and lead you through the streets of London. Let me show you something that will make you change your mind. So we start today at the Wallace Collection. Now this building is in Manchester Square. It's within walking distance of Selfridges on London's Oxford Street. So just behind is Manchester Square. And it's a museum which displays the work of art collected in the 18th and 19th century by 5 generations of a British aristocratic family, the Marquess of Hertford and Sir Richard Wallace. Now, the Marquess of Hertford and his family were one of the wealthiest families in Europe, and Sir Richard Wallace became a leading art collector of their time. The collection comprises about 5,000 works of art, and it was given to the British nation by Lady Wallace in 1897. The state, the government, then decided to buy Hertford House to display this collection, and it was opened as a museum in the year 1900. Now, this is the grand entrance to the Wallace Collection, but when you go in, just behind this mirror is a gift shop, and just the other side of the gift shop is the Sikh armor collection. And when you go there, you will see this. Now, this magnificent sword, or shamshir, is one of the greatest Sikh treasures in London. Now, when we did tour 1, we saw the Kohinoor and we saw the throne. But for me, this one is less known. Most international visitors will want to see the Kohinoor or the throne, but this one is equally as great, I think. It was acquired in 1865 in Paris by Lord Hertford, and it's a fine and rare example. And the interesting thing here is that the mount here and all of this work here, it's solid gold rather than gold damascened iron. And the only and most important prestigious swords would be richly decorated like this. Now this sword here, it retains its original scabbard here with its straps and for its belt. And again, they're all pure gold, and it's carved, this bit here is carved from exotic walrus ivory, which would have been very expensive, and the blade is watered steel. Now this weapon, it would have been perfectly capable of causing death in battle, but it's more likely to have been carried whilst hunting rather than in war. Now, if we take a closer look here, you see all the intricate artwork in that solid gold I talked about earlier, but it's interesting that on the other side of the sword, we have the lion of Punjab, as Maharaja Ranjit Singh was known. Now, here it is in full length with a scabbard. And if we go, we introduced you to the Anglo-Sikh Museum in our first tour when we looked at the Kohinoor. And again, they have this sword on the Anglo-Sikh Museum website. So like we said back in our first tour, if you have a phone, if you have the internet, you can just click here, go to the relics page, and you'll see a whole range of relics, including this sword. And this sword is from a private collection, and it's by Sukhbinder Singh Paul and family from London. And it's dated from originally around 1820 to 1840. So again, during the height of that Sikh Empire. Let's take a look at it in 3D. So now this depiction of Guru Nanak here, if we look at this depiction of Guru Nanak Dev Ji here, it's extremely rare, and it's few times you'll see Guru Nanak Dev Ji with the sword. And this type of sword, there are a few. There's one in the Royal Collection Trust, so that belongs to the Queen. There's one at the museum in Harmandir Sahib in Amritsar, and one can be found at the Wallace collection. So next time I'm there, I'll be looking out for this sword rather than the other stuff that we see there. And this is particularly good for children who can explore. And I think the team from Gurinder Singh Maan and Taranjeet, they've written up all the history, so you can read it about it yourself as well. We're going to stay in Westminster. We're going to move to Trafalgar Square. Now, Trafalgar Square is a famous landmark since the 13th century, the centre. And it was known as the King's Mews, and it contained stables of the monarchy. Now, George IV moved the Mews to Buckingham Palace in 1825, and then redevelopment of the area took place. Now, the original Trafalgar Square wasn't built to commemorate a battle, but it acquired the name following a court circular in 1835. Now, for me, when I do these tours in London, it's quite interesting because you can say Trafalgar in any kind of Cockney accents, you know, Trafalgar, Trafalgar. But the actual word Trafalgar is a Spanish word of Arabic origin, derived from Taraf al-Gharb. Taraf al-Gharb becomes Trafalgar, Trafalgar, direction of the West, which commemorates the Battle of Trafalgar, that British naval victory that took place in 1805 during the Napoleonic Wars. Now, at the center of Trafalgar Square stands Horatio Nelson, but if we look carefully, we're going to look at a statue that stands here. Yeah, and we'll go to him. It's this gentleman. At the corner of Trafalgar Square, facing Northumberland Avenue, stands Major General Sir Henry Havelock. Now, he was a British general who was particularly associated with India and noted for the recapture of Kanpur from rebels during the rebellion of 1857. Now, the statue itself actually includes a citation to the Firozpur Regiment of Sikhs. Now, at the start of the Great Mutiny of the Bengal Army in 1857, the regiment was at Mirzapur, where it received orders to proceed by forced march to Allahabad, a strong point of the mutiny. Now, if we look at an extract from James Outram's life, it says, "It was Lieutenant Brazier and his Sikhs, the regiment of Firozpur, who alone saved the lives of all the Europeans, including 250 women and children, at Allahabad. Had the fort fallen into the hands of the rebels at this moment, the result would have been calamitous." Now, after Allahabad, the regiment of Firozpur joined the Firozpur relief of Lucknow under General Havelock. So they went from Allahabad to Lucknow. And General Havelock said to his Sikhs after their engagement with the rebels, he said, "Soldiers, your labors, your valor, your privations, and your suffering." So he said, "Soldiers, your labor, your privations, your valor, and your sufferings will not be forgotten by a grateful country." Very interesting. So, and what happened was, for their services, General Havelock promoted all the Indian ranks in the Firozpur regiment a step in rank to Subadar, in lieu of a promotion to the Indian Order of Merit. Now, as a special distinction, he allowed this regiment to wear a red pagri, which is still in use to today by the Firozpur Regiment of Sikhs. Now, when you do military history, these regiments, you have to trace them back, and every time they have a new leader, they change the name. So it is the 14th Firozpur Sikhs, but they've been given various different names through all these reorganizations. So now, interestingly, this history connects to a more modern day Sikh history with one of the largest Sikh Gurdwaras, the longest established Sikh Gurdwaras in England and possibly Europe, the Singh Sabha Gurdwara in Southall. Now, in Southall in Ealing, it's actually located on a road called Havelock Road, named after this very general, whose words to his Sikhs are memorialized in Trafalgar Square. "Soldiers, your labors, your sufferings, your valor will not be forgotten by a grateful country." So for me, it's these interesting twists in history. In 1857, he was thanking the Sikhs. 100 years later, approximately in 1967, we find that a Gurdwara is purchased or built on Havelock Road in Ealing, and it's now grown to become a magnificent Gurdwara, as you can see here.
You're showing these pictures of the Gurdwara at Havelock Road, and that has brought back some very nostalgic memories for me. And because I had the honor to personally work with the Gurdwara in 2002 and design the impressively sized stained glass window panel that you see at the main entrance of the Gurdwara. And it's an interesting story how I got involved, because I was living in Chandigarh in India at that time. And in 2002, I visited UK. This was my first visit. And I happened to meet the president of the Gurdwara, Mr. Sohi, at that time. And he very kindly showed me the designs of the building, which they were building. The building was in progress at that time. And he also shared with me the designs for the stained glass windows, which had been created by an English architect. And of course, it was a familiar cathedral style, serpents and wine kind of a pattern that I think it was. And as a Sikh, that just did not speak to me. And I thought, like, they're building this magnificent Gurdwara with these impressive domes and having a stained glass window above the main entrance, which will look like a cathedral. So at that point, I took it up as a challenge, and I offered to them that I would create a design for their consideration, which will relate to our heritage, and they fortunately agreed. So I went back to Chandigarh, worked with my team, and while designing the panel, we were driven by a desire to project the concept of Sikhi in this very Western form. So the design that you see the panel on your screen now, it depicts the symbolically the Amrit Sanchar ceremony. And at the bottom end corner is placed the Khanda and Bata containing the Amrit. And from this Amrit arise these 5 dastars, Kesari dastars, flowing upwards and outwards in different directions, symbolizing the creation of the Khalsa and the spread of Sikhi to all the corners of the world. And once this design was accepted, we then went on to work on the main palkis in the Gurdwara. The main hall has this gold palki, and the second hall has a palki which is made in pure silver. And you might not believe this, but both these palkis were designed and fabricated in my workshop at my home in Chandigarh. So yes, you have that newspaper clip from 2002. Which shows that. So as you can imagine, this Gurdwara really holds a very, very special place for me. Thank you for including it in the tour today. Thank you, Rav.
The National Liberal Club. Now, the National Liberal Club was established by William Gladstone in 1882. Let me just check the video. Yep. So it was established by Gladstone in 1882 for the purposes of providing club facilities for Liberal Party campaigners. Now, the club is housed in this impressive neo-Gothic building over the embankment of the River Thames, and the club's foundation stone was laid by Gladstone himself on the 9th of November, 1884. Now, it has this magnificent tower, which is here, and which means that you have to go up the tower. And at the end of the hall, opposite the main entrance, is this principal staircase, which rises from the basement up to the 4th floor. It's of elliptical form, and the steps, which are 8 foot wide, are supported by an outer and inner wall. It truly is an amazing staircase. Yeah, it is a special feature of the club, and it goes round and round and round and round up to the 4th floor. And you see NLC there, the National Liberal Club. When you get to the very top, there's a smaller staircase which leads you to the summit, from where you can see some unique views of London, of the bridges towards St. Paul's Cathedral. Now, when you get to the top of this staircase, and we've done many tours where we've walked up and you get tired and you go up and you keep going up, you get to the top and you see this. You see a room, and you go through these magnificent rooms with chandeliers, and it is, you know, amazing. And just outside this room, outside this door, is this painting. Now, this painting is an 1854 oil painting of Maharaja Dalip Singh. And, you know, we often, unless there's politicians or private functions going, we're often allowed to go up all the way to the top and view. So Sonia ji, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us more about this painting now.
Thank you, Rav. So this elegant portrait of Maharaja Dalip Singh is one of the many copies of the original, which is a full-length, life-size, 6-foot tall painting, and it hangs in the Osborne House today. So this is the one which is at the Osborne House, and this is a 6-foot tall painting, and is literally an iconic portrait of the young 16-year-old Maharaja Dalip Singh, showing him dressed in silks reminiscent of the Lahore court. And it was painted very soon after his arrival in England from India in 1854. Now, while he's dressed in these silks, which are reminiscent of the Lahore court, but on his neck, he's wearing a choker, which has the portrait of Queen Victoria, made by Emily Eden. And it was commissioned by the Queen herself because she was quite taken in by this young, handsome Maharaja. And she got the German artist, Franz Winterhalter, who was at that time the principal portrait painter at her court and remained for the first half of her reign. And he painted some 100 other paintings of other royal members of the family. Now, Franz Winterhalter was a very prolific painter, and he worked for other European royal families as well, going from Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, Russia, even Mexico. And so he maintained a very busy schedule and had a large number of apprentices and assistants to work with him in the studio. So while he was making these portraits, these apprentices would make copies of the portraits, mostly smaller in size than the originals, and also reproduce them as lithographs. And that is the reason why you will find similar portraits of Dalip Singh, which are dated to the original painting in 1854, because they were made then, but just as per how the original one is in Osborne House. And the one that you have shown today, which hangs at the National Liberal Club, is one of these many copies. And in fact, a similar piece had come up for auction a few weeks ago in London as well, which are smaller in size than the painting. So we also see this small watercolor sketch of the Maharaja, which is in profile, which is also made by Franz Winterhalter during the same time in 1854. And it probably served as a study for the main painting. And both of these paintings are in the Royal Collection.
I want to stay here at the National Liberal Club, because as you walk up the stairs, you get to the top and you see Prince Albert, Queen Victoria, and close and really slightly above them, Maharaja Dalip Singh, token gesture. But next to Dalip Singh, you see this painting as well. And this is Lieutenant General Colin Mackenzie. Now, he was a Scottish officer in the Indian Army. He was born in London, but his father lost much during the war with the French in the early 18th century. Now, he was selected in 1840 for the forces that served in Afghanistan, and Mackenzie distinguished himself at Peshawar and Jalalabad. But Mackenzie was then later employed on the northwest frontier, and he raised the 4th Sikh Regiment, which kept peace at the border during the Second Anglo-Sikh War. Now, I'm trying to read more and more about him, and it's very difficult because everything you read about him is actually about his war credentials and his efforts in war. But I've been in the club with other people, and they've recognized this painting, some historians, and what they've told me is that he actually was the first person to bring a saroop of the Shri Guru Granth Sahib Ji to the UK in the Gurmukhi format, and he's at the National Liberal Club, and the Liberal Party had values which were very much aligned to the Kingdom of Punjab's values, I feel. And it's interesting. So I have read a little bit about him, and there's lots more to read about him. He's currently buried in Edinburgh, and he was described as a saint soldier, interestingly enough. the Khalsa Jatha, British Isles, 1908. Now we're going to take you to 1906, right? So in 1906, a group of 5 young Amritdhari Sikhs were sent to England by Sant Attar Singh Ji. Sant Attar Singh Ji Mastuana Wale is on the left here. Now, Sant Attar Singh wanted to reverse a trend of Sikhs cutting their hair and embracing the consumption of alcohol upon arrival in Western countries, and he began to lay the foundations for Sikhi to be performed in the West. Attar Singh's work and vision introduced him to Niranjan Singh Mehta, who was the principal of Khalsa College in Amritsar. In time, Niranjan Singh Mehta was initiated to the Khalsa with an Amrit Sanchar by Attar Singh Ji, who changed his name to Teja Singh. So Teja Singh was instructed with a group of another 4 Sikhs to go abroad and to implement his vision of establishing the foundations of Sikhi. Now, Dharmanand Singh, Amar Singh, Hari Singh, Bhagat Singh, and Teja Singh arrived in London in August in 1906. Now, these young Sikhs enrolled at universities, at the University College London and at Downing College in Cambridge, and a small congregation began to form. They met every Sunday. Other Sikhs joined them, who were those existing Sikhs who came to study at these universities, and they laid the foundations for the formation of the Khalsa Jatha, which was established in 1908. And interestingly, if you go to the Times on the 3rd of July, 1911, it describes this. So the founding members, they used to contribute a monthly sum of £1 for the running of the Jatha, and they were looking for a location which would serve as a Gurdwara. The students met with Maharaja Bhupinder Singh of Patiala. He was on a tour of England with the Indian cricket team, and he was also attending the coronation of King George V and Queen Mary in June 1911. So here we see an article from the Times which says that a deputation from the British branch of the Khalsa Jatha, together with military officers from Hampton Court, had waited on His Highness the Maharaja of Patiala to urge upon him the necessity of having a dharamshala, or a Sikh church, in the metropolis, and for that purpose to request him on behalf of the Sikh community to perform a preliminary ceremony in commemoration of the coronation of their majesties. Don't know what that means. The Maharaja acceded to the request and promised a donation of £8,000. So he promised this £8,000, and they were able to lease a property in Putney. Now, that Putney property, we don't know too much about the exact location, but very quickly he came to London again, and by 1913 they moved to this property here, which was 79 Sinclair Road. So they moved here in 1913, and they stayed there for some time. How many years? Maybe 56 years. They stayed in this property 56 years, and then they moved to 62 Queensdale Road, where the current Gurdwara Sahib is still located. Now, in 1913, this Gurdwara here, this would serve as the site of the first Sikh place of worship in Europe. And all of the small but growing Sikh community would engage with this centre. Many illustrious visitors who were helped to settle in London. These included the Sikh scholar, renowned Sikh scholar Khan Singh Nabha, who actually served as part of the initial 1913 committee. Maharaja Bhupinder Singh would also stay here at his dharamshala, whilst he also had his official Patiala base in the Savoy Hotel. Now this is our first engagement with Princess Sophia, but it's recorded that Princess Sophia, she would also visit here because she had much affection for her father's countrymen. And interestingly, we have some more. We have Manmohan Singh, who became a Sikh Indian Air Force pilot in the 1940s. Khushwant Singh, who wrote many books, became a prominent author, historian, and writer. He was a law student at King's College in London. He arrived in 1934 and engaged with the Dharamshala. And famously, Uddham Singh, who was a revolutionary in the struggle for Indian freedom. So we'll come more to him later in the tour. But he arrived in England around 1933, and he is renowned amongst the Sikh community. Now, as the funds were raised, the Jatha purchased this building, which was known as Norland Castle. And they moved actually from the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham to the London Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And that's where the current Gurdwara now stands. Now, the current Gurdwara has been part of a major refurbishment in recent years. It's been upgraded, modernized, eco-friendly. It's got solar panels on the roof. And I've been visiting more regularly. And there's a committee in place which now want to see it become like that trailblazer Gurdwara, be innovative, be kind of an incubation unit for new projects. So I think there's a lot more to come now from this Gurdwara. So Benji, to you.
Yes, thank you, Rav. So Rav, it's very interesting that when you're telling us the history of the establishment of this Gurdwara going way back to 1911. And this is also around the same time that the first Gurdwara in the United States is established by the pioneer Sikh farmers in Stockton, California in 1912, which is just a few hours drive from where I am in Cupertino. And it is these Sikh farmers who then go on to organize and form the Ghadar Party in 1913 with the aim to end the British occupation of India. And preceding both the UK Gurdwara as well as the one in the US is in 1908, when the Khalsa Diwan Society in Canada in Abbotsford, which is near Vancouver, established the first Gurdwara. And today this Gurdwara is being proclaimed as a National Historic Site of Canada. And there is also a small museum display there. And I recall that in our last tour, you talked about Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee Parade. And we saw that magnificent painting of the Indian cavalry escorting the Queen's carriage. So I want you to take you back there, because it is those very soldiers who, when they were returning to India, stopped over in Canada and were really impressed with the land. And they are the ones who become the pioneers of Sikh immigration to North America. So it's just so interesting how around the same time, 1908 to 1913, these activities are happening in these three different places in UK, the US, and Canada. But coming to some more recent, relatively more recent history, the Sikh Foundation also has, with the Sinclair Road Gurdwara, the picture that you showed,
I've got it back.
that involves Dr. Narinder Singh Kapani, the founder of the Sikh Foundation, with whom I've had the honor to work for many years now. And Dr. Kapani is also known as the father of fiber optics. And this is where he invented and pursued the study of this subject while he was a PhD student at Imperial College, which is very close to the Sinclair Road Gurdwara. And he lived very close to it as well. And in 1954, he and Satinder Kaur, a student of English at the University of London at that time, were married. And we have this lovely photograph that you just showed of the newly married couple just outside the Gurdwara building, getting into the Rolls Royce, which really was the talk of the town in that year. And we also have another photograph, which was taken inside the Gurdwara during the marriage itself. And if you look carefully at the photograph, you see a couple taking their lamas like all couples do. This is around the Shri Guru Granth Sahib, which is in a very simple setting. And the lama part is being recited by a woman member of the Sangat. This is something that we often do not see even in today's modern times. So just wanted to add in Sikh Foundation's history with Sinclair Road as well.
Now this building, in 1878, a competition was designed for a hall. It was by the parish of St. Margaret and St. John, and the hall competition was won, and it was designed in this Francois I style, using red brick and pink sandstone. And it was originally called Westminster City Hall, and it was then opened as Westminster Town Hall in 1883. And it had these two public halls called the Great and York Hall. And after the Second World War, it became a registry office for the central London area, and it was used by high society for celebrity marriages. Now, this hall, which I haven't yet named, is on a street called Caxton Street and is more popularly known as Caxton Hall, although the official title was Westminster Town Hall until recent years. Now, the whole registry office closed in 1979. The site was redeveloped in 2006 as apartments and offices. Now, the facade and the former registry office was restored and retained, but actually those great halls, the Great and York Hall, was demolished. So behind this is basically a glass office block, and it's only the front that's been retained. Now, in terms of its association with Sikh and Anglo-Sikh history, Caxton Hall is associated with a number of events. Now, I found this quite interesting because many visitors, if I say Caxton Hall, straight away they jump to the last event associated with it, which is the assassination of Sir Michael O'Dwyer by Udham-Singh, and we'll come on to him. But if we go back to 1909. So in 1909, Caxton Hall is associated with something called Guru Gobind Singh Day. So you remember those Sikhs that came in 1906, they became active straight away. In 1907, they had Guru Gobind Singh Day. And in 1909, they celebrated Guru Gobind Singh Day with a meeting at Caxton Hall. And they gave out a leaflet saying, Bande Mataram Khalsa, Bande Mataram Khalsa, which was distributed to awaken the Sikhs from British rule here. Now, I'm going to take you to the 1920s now. So this is Caxton Hall, where we do our tours, the most popular location, if I ever weave it in. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got their own version of the same story, which is interesting. But I'm going to show you this video. Let's have a look at this, and we'll come back to it. You see Caxton Hall? Let's stop. Now, I'm going to stop here. I'll stop here. Okay, now, this gentleman, as it says at the top of the slide, is Maharaja of Patiala at Caxton Hall. Now, this gentleman here, we're going to look at. So this is 1920s, yeah? Caxton Hall is a hall for public meetings in Westminster. So let's come on to the story soon. And this is who it is. So let me just go back. It is quite, because this video isn't popularly available. No one really searches for it. Look at him. Look at these two. There's a Sikh, but he's the Maharaja of Patiala. He is this gentleman. There he is in the paper. Sir Michael O'Dwyer. So he met Bhupinder Singh of Patiala in the 1920s. And in 1940, on the 13th of March, he was assassinated by Shaheed Udham-Singh. So O'Dwyer was the Lieutenant Governor of Punjab at the time of the Amritsar massacre of 1919. Brigadier General O'Dwyer, with Michael O'Dwyer's full support, ordered soldiers to open fire on a crowd of Indian independent supporters. Now, the day after the massacre, where hundreds of protesters died in cold blood, the brigadier received a telegram from this man, O'Dwyer, which said, "Your actions were correct. The Lieutenant Governor approves." And 21 years after that massacre, Udham-Singh pulled out a Smith & Wesson revolver at a meeting in Caxton Hall and fired 6 shots, 2 of them which hit the former governor of Punjab and killing him instantly. And to me, it's just these, we've done a lot of these quirks in history, but look at this, so we have a Sikh meeting O'Dwyer in the 1920s and a Sikh killing O'Dwyer at the same location 21 years later. It's quite interesting. Now, Caxton Hall continues to have links with Sikh history. So let's go to another image here. Now, this is a photograph of the Women's Social and Political Union. Now, this Women's Social and Political Union was founded in Manchester back in 1903 by Emily Pankhurst. Now, if you're in the UK and you're at primary school and you do the suffragettes, the name Emily Pankhurst is familiar to many children. Yeah. In January 1906, it moved from Manchester to London to focus on becoming a national organisation. And Caxton Hall was chosen as the venue for its first large meeting in the city, which took place on the 19th of February 1906. And it was attended by 400 women, mainly from the East End of London. And following that meeting, they marched to the House of Commons to lobby their MPs. Now, in 1907, on the 13th of February 1907, the Women's Social and Political Union held its first Women's Parliament at the Caxton Hall. And this is a photograph of the Women's Parliament. Now, following the meeting, deputations would march from Caxton Hall to the House of Commons to deliver their resolutions, and the police would always be out in force, and there were always arrests. Now, the Women's Union held 10 parliaments at Caxton Hall between 1907 and 1911, and the building provided the backdrop to some of the best-known events in the Union's militant campaign. They were particularly violently treated by the police in 1910, and that resulted in campaigners resorting to greater militancy. And following the 10th Women's Parliament in 1911, the suffragettes gathered at government buildings and carried out coordinated mass window smashing. And then from that point on, their attacks on property escalated. Now, I'm struggling here, but I do know that Sophia is in this photograph. And I wish I had someone who could point her out to me. She is here.
That's the one.
Ah, this one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I knew it. She's in the background. Yes, that's it. Why good she is. So Sophia, she was an influential and prominent suffragette in the United Kingdom. As we know, her father was Maharaja Dalip Singh. He was taken from the Kingdom of Punjab and was subsequently exiled to Britain. Now, during the early 20th century, Singh was one of several Indian women who pioneered the cause of women's rights in Britain. She's best remembered for her leading role in the Women's Tax Resistance League, and she also participated in that Women's Social and Political Union. She was the goddaughter of Queen Victoria, who was very fond of her and gave her a house in Hampton Court. And supported by the goodwill of Queen Victoria, she was introduced to high society as a debutant. So it was very embarrassing for the establishment to see such a high-profile figure associated with the suffragettes. Now, she made secret visits to India in 1907, and she came into eye-opening contact with poverty, inequality, and the concept of Indian independence. And that experience had a major and lasting effect on her. And she became a militant activist for women's rights in 1909, and she believed in forceful protest as well as vocally supporting the movement. Now, interestingly, so remember I said they walked from Caxton Hall to Parliament, and it's only a short walk, it's 5 minutes or less. And to commemorate the 100th anniversary, this statue was unveiled on the 24th of April, 2018. Now, the Representation of Peoples Act took place in 1918, and Gillian Waring designed this statue. And this statue is of, I think it's Dame Millicent Fawcett. Yeah, and the words are "courage calls to courage everywhere." And that was shortened from a sentence that Millicent wrote a few years after the death of Emily Davidson, who was hit by the King's horse at the Epsom Derby. So you had these two suffragettes. You had Millicent Fawcett, who believed in peaceful protest, and then you had Emily Davidson, who believed in violent protest, and she was killed when she was protesting at the Epsom Derby. And interestingly, on the plinth of this statue, you have these photographs. So this is the prototype, but you have all these photographs along the plinth, and it has 55 women and 4 men who supported the women's suffrage. And Sophia is here. There she is in that corner, which is now, I think, on this corner, when in the full design. And what she said, so she used to get arrested, and the next day, any suffragettes who were arrested, she would sell her jewelry, so sell jewelry from her father, and to pay the fines. And they would come out of court, do the same thing again, go back to court, and then to keep paying the fines, she used to sell jewelry. And what she said was that taxation without representation is a tyranny. I am unable to pay money to the state as I am not allowed to exercise any control over its expenditure. And that was her reply in court when she was refused to pay license fees and rates. Now that's one suffragette, but there were others, and there is also an image of Lolita Roy. Now she moved to Hammersmith in 1901 from Calcutta, and she was a prominent figure in the fight for both British and Indian women's suffrage. I won't go into too much details of her life, but only that there's now a very, very nice modern art installation in Hammersmith to commemorate her efforts as well. So our last stop is here, the British Museum, in today's tour. Now, the British Museum is located on Great Russell Street in the London Borough of Camden. Its collections are dedicated to human history and culture, which was a learning point for me, really, because when I take tour groups here, they're all keen to learn about British stuff, and you get to the British Museum and there is nothing British in the British Museum. It's very difficult to find any maypoles or Morris dancing or stuff to do with Britain, tea and things like this, because basically it has 8 million works, and it's the largest and most comprehensive collection originating from all the continents of the world. So when we spoke about the empire, this is where they have many collections. Now, the museum was established in 1753, and it was based on the collections of Sir Hans Sloane. It opened to the public in 1759 in Bloomsbury on this site, and its expansion took 2.5 centuries because of the expanding British colonial footprint and all of the stuff they were bringing back from the empire. So I just want to go back a few years, because when I used to go here before 2014, that's all they had. They've got 8 million works here, and the only item on display was this Sikh coin. That is not that rare, you know. They have lots in the print section, lots elsewhere, but it's all hidden and you have to make appointments to see it. And this was the only item, and all they wrote was brass temple token showing Guru Nanak, founder of the Sikh religion, with 2 attendants. So not even Balla and Mardana or Mardana ji. It just said 2 attendants. So I really didn't incorporate the British Museum into my tours, because I have these coins in my pocket so I can show them wherever I want. And that was a bit disappointing, but some of the things we've been speaking about, curators, artists, creative arts, these people are now beginning to be employed. They understand Sikhi, or they are aware of Sikhi. They're from our own community and they're working for these museums. They're dotted around London now. There's one at the National Army Museum, there's one at the V&A Museum, and there was a lady at the British Museum. I'm sure she's still there. I don't know her personally, but in 2011, she organized a fabulous Vaisakhi event. I have lots of photos, but I didn't put them in here. And they put the Star Bunga on display with UK PHA for about 6 months. And then it went back or went on tour to Leeds and places like this. And now, I think for the last few years, they have revamped the South Asia galleries. So you go into the South Asia galleries, and these 3 galleries here, these 3 areas here, are all about Sikhi, life at the court and the art of storytelling, 1600 to 1900. And it's one of the few museums where I've seen Gurbani here, above one of the galleries. Pao kalam kar chit lekhari gurpuch lik bichar, lik naam salah lik lik antana paravar. Make the heart the pen, the intellect the writer, and through the guru write that which has no end or limit. And when you go here now, and I want to take every tour here, because they have put back the Dastar Bunga on display. So the Dastar Bunga is a rare and distinct type of turban, literally meaning a towering fortress, a style of turban that was worn by the Agallis, who are skilled warriors who use this turban to hold their weapons, including daggers, swords, and deadly throwing discs. Now, it's unclear how long the museum have had this turban, but it dates from the late 19th century and may have come to London in the early 1900s. It has a badge of the 45th Rattray Sikh battalion. So that was a battalion raised after the first or second Anglo-Sikh war by James Rattray. And it's his badge that sits on this Agalli turban as well, which is interesting. Now, the Rattray Sikhs became the 3rd Sikh battalion in the present Indian Day Army. We also have those coins. So they had 1 on display. They've got 8 now, 8 different ones. They have some artwork, I think, by Bairam Singh. Amazing shields, weapons, quoits, and a full gari here as well. So that's one cabinet. But on the other cabinet, you have this. You have the sari of gold sari belonging to Princess Sophia Dalip Singh. Now, this is from the Bantz collection. Peter Bantz, who's probably the leading expert on the Dalip Singhs in the UK, if not the world. But this is from his collection. It's loaned to the museum on a long loan. And it's amazing that, you know, we can see Sophia now. A few years ago, there wasn't a statue, there wasn't her items on display. And now through curation works, we can see her sari, we can see her image, and we can connect to that story, interestingly enough. So Sophia, she was the actual princess. She combined this Votes for Women. She sold copies of the Suffragette magazine. She sold these out of an old satchel while wrapped up in furs. So she's wearing some very expensive furs with an old satchel selling copies of the Suffrage magazine. And that's a photograph of her outside Hampton Court Palace. And look, she's featured on a stamp now, and which was very rare. We didn't have very many people from Sikh and Anglo-Sikh history on stamps until very recently, although I have many stamps from around the world. She was the first to be featured on a British stamp. And just last month, we had another British stamp featuring a Sikh, this time a Sikh soldier from the Second World War. So it's just interesting. So that, I think, is how we're going to end the tour, Benji.
Thank you, Rav. I'm glad I let you go on and didn't stop you in between. Wonderful information. And this is, I think, Sophia Dalip Singh's story is inspiring, and it is particularly relevant because this year, 2020, marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment and protecting women's constitutional right to vote here in the US. And it is unfortunate that many in our community and the world at large, I would say, are not aware of her leadership roles, her activism role in getting women the right to vote in Britain, and also being a strong advocate for India's freedom from British rule. So till her dying days, actually, she always stressed to all the women in her life that she came across that they must vote, and reminding them of the struggle that she and others had to go through to achieve this right. So England gets in 1918 the limited franchise where only certain women with property, etc., could vote. But in 1928, the universal franchise in UK is established. And another inspiring or interesting aspect, I should say, of Sophia's life, which I read in the book by Anita Anand, which is her biography that she's written, is that Sophia, though she was a church-going, practicing Christian all her life, but she explicitly expressed that her body should be cremated as per Sikh rites, and her ashes should be scattered in Punjab and India. And it was her sister, Bamba Dalip Singh, who fulfilled this wish for her. And I must say that even Maharaja Dalip Singh had the same wish that he had expressed, but that did not happen. So I'm thinking, like, despite the great lengths that the British went to anglicize Maharaja Dalip Singh and his family, we still find this human desire to connect to one's roots and honor that connection. And I feel that it somehow does not die, no matter what. And Sophia and Bamba were really two of Dalip Singh's children who always wanted, they were like dying to go back to the Punjab, to see the land of their forefathers. And the other thing about Sophia was that she was totally committed to women's advancement through education. And on her death, she left a significant amount of money to be given to 3 schools for girls. One was a Sikh school, one was for Muslim girls, and one is for Hindu girls. So she explicitly said that these 3 schools should get the money. And to me, it is Sophia Dalip Singh building upon the secular vision of her grandfather, Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And it gives me personal satisfaction that even though we have not heard anything of the daughters of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and here we have his granddaughters doing him and us proud through their brave and daring life. So I'm very delighted that, like you mentioned, we are finding more and more Sikh history, arts, heritage being depicted in the museums, that even our contemporary artists are now getting interested in the story of Sapphire. This is a recent painting done by the US artist Sarabjit Singh, who has painted the Princess Sophia, Dalip Singh. And this painting was done to commemorate International Women's Day for the Sikh Women's Organization of Central California.